Welcome to Your Need to Know. I'm your host, Catherine Reed, and joining me today is Joe Fay. He is the Executive Director of FACETS, which is a locally based nonprofit here in Northern Virginia. Welcome, Joe.
Thank you, Catherine. Glad to be here.
So you're celebrating your 30th year. You have been here for a year as Executive Director, but the organization is celebrating 30 years.
Right.
So somewhere along the way, most of our viewers have probably encountered FACETS, we should hope, through one of your many programs.
Right.
So I see your FACETS van at the Circle in Fairfax City in the Home Depot parking lot quite regularly.
Right.
That is your Hot Meals program.
Right, exactly. Yeah, which was our first program. Linda Wimpy founded FACETS in 1988. It's amazing, a small local nonprofit can keep running for 30 years. But it started because Linda noticed that folks who were being put up, who were homeless and being put up in motels because there weren't county shelters at the time, really had no mechanism. You can't cook in a motel.
Right.
So your options are really limited. And she began FACETS with a hot meals program, three times a week delivering hot meals. We now deliver meals 7 days a week and twice on Sundays at 3 stops along the Route 50 corridor. So that Home Depot parking lot is one of the stops. And it's an all volunteer program. Different groups take a night, there's a group that does every third Tuesday every month, and they prepare the meals, package the meals, and then deliver the meals. And really fantastic program.
And are some of your volunteers faith communities, service clubs? Who are the people in your all-volunteer hot meals effort?
It's a lot of faith communities. It's some service clubs. Sometimes it's a couple faith communities getting together. One of the things I've been really impressed with FACETS is the number of volunteers that participate in our programs. The hot meals program is one that's all volunteer run. The Hypothermia program runs from November, the Sunday after Thanksgiving through April 1st, so we're towards the end of hypothermia season, but it's to give people a place to come in out of the cold overnight. Also all volunteer run. Each faith community takes a week at a time and opens up their doors to provide a bed, a hot meal at night, breakfast in the morning, and some fellowship to people who would otherwise be dealing with the elements.
Yeah, and it's hard in the suburbs. I mean, we are not Washington, D.C. We're not a city. We're a sprawling, huge county of 1.2 million people.
Right.
And so if you can't stay out in the elements, and we do have a lot of homeless who stay out in the elements.
Right.
When it gets really, really cold, these faith communities are pulling together their volunteers within their own faith community and opening the doors because many of them have enough space to host these folks.
Right.
And it's safe. It's
safe. It's safe from the elements. It's a safe place, from all the dangers that are outside.
And I love the fact that Fairfax County, I mean, we have had exponential growth, it's true, but not that long ago, there were rural areas of Fairfax County. People have seen the exponential growth, but the core values of the people in our community, as far as volunteers, because I sit on the board of Bright Paths, and we also have been around for about 33 years.
Right.
And we have a core of volunteers who've been with us, some of them the whole time.
Yeah.
So even though the demand has grown and the need has grown and the county has grown, these volunteers have been remarkable.
It's amazing. I talked to some folks at some of the programs, the really early, like the Hot Meals program, and they'll say, well, our church has been doing it since the start, and we've been doing it for 25 years. It's just amazing.
Such commitment.
Yeah.
So talk a little bit about...
So sorry, you mentioned you've seen our vans around, right?
Yes.
And it's true, we've got the white FACETS vans, and you'll see them delivering the hot meals. We also use them for the hypothermia program to drive, because we're a sprawling suburb.
Wow.
And we're in different locations every week, right? A lot of times we'll pick up folks from the Lamb Center, a day center, to take them to the location for hypothermia that night.
See, now I did not even know that, and I know the Lamb Center very well.
Right.
Again, it's in the city. David Larrabee has done such a marvelous job in keeping that together. And you're right, he can only provide day services, but I never wondered about how they got to wherever the shelter was.
It's public transportation, vans, and we cobble it together. On a given week, it's a different transportation challenge depending on where the hypothermia site is.
That is amazing to know. See, that no matter how much you think you know an organization, nobody ever knows all of the inner workings.
Right, exactly.
So your homelessness program, so there's an Office to Prevent and End Homelessness in Fairfax County.
Right.
Dean Klein runs that program, and I'm familiar with it. Talk a little bit about sort of the public-private partnership aspect of how you as a nonprofit are working with this government agency to address this issue.
You know, you talk about Fairfax County and the long-time commitment to volunteerism. Fairfax County also has a very good commitment to human services in our government.
Yes.
And that Office to Prevent and End Homelessness is one embodiment of that, right? The commitment to build our community and to serve those most in need in our community. So we work with the Office to Prevent and End Homelessness along with several other nonprofits, and it's a fantastic partnership. We meet every month with Dean, the executive directors of various groups, and we talk about the issues we're facing. You know, Fairfax County runs a number of shelters throughout a very large county.
But it's very interesting because the government has public policy authority, so they make public policy.
Right.
They can allocate resources,
right.
but the direct services are not something that they are doing. In other words, the Office to Prevent and End Homelessness works with FACETS or Homestretch or the Kate Hanley Family Shelter or many number to actually deliver these direct services.
Right. I think the county government decided that was a very efficient way to deliver services. Right, we have more flexibility, I think, in terms of hiring, in terms of pay, in terms of part-time work, and in terms of pulling in volunteers who also work with us, as well as pulling in some external funding, right, through donations. That a government organization wouldn't have. So it's a very effective partnership and very efficient, I think, in terms of the bang we get for the government dollar spent.
And that is very important when you look at trying to keep your organization afloat.
Right.
Not only do you depend on volunteers who are actually providing a lot of these services, they're giving of their time, but you have to raise the money to also fund things like the vans or the food or the things that are not donated or the services that aren't donated. But these are all services taxpayers aren't paying for because you know, the county's decided to partner with a nonprofit.
County partners, and we get some funding from the county, right? And without it, we wouldn't be keeping our doors open. But we're also raising those funds as well.
So when I spoke in front of the Fairfax County Board of Supervisors probably a year or so ago, there's a day where all of the nonprofits go and plead that they please not cut any funding for human services. Please, and let me explain to you why. But one of the things that I did point out to the Board of Supervisors is for every $1 that you give to nonprofits like Bright Paths, we are raising $3 or $4 or $5. So what you've done is you've invested.
It's a leverage model.
You've invested to give us enough so that we can go out and take your investment of $1 and turn it into direct services that the county would not be able to provide.
By much more than that $1.
So it's an investment, and so that's a different paradigm, and it's a different way of looking at what you're doing is FACETS and trying to raise money and supplement what the county's giving you, so that you're working together to provide the best possible services for the largest number of people. And it's a big county. It's
a big county, and the Office to Prevent and End Homelessness also provides HUD-mandated components like a centralized database and tracking. So we have standards across all the service delivery providers that are coordinated by the Office to Prevent and End Homelessness, which I think is also important, right?
Sure,
that each of us are consistency. Every citizen gets the same services, and we learn from each other as well.
So how have you managed to cover such a large county? I mean, going from Alexandria on the eastern end to Centerville on the western side and down to Lorton on this. It's a big county.
It's a big county. Yeah.
So how do you manage to try to meet the demand in all of these places?
Well, again, we're one of many nonprofits working to meet the demand, but it really is project-based and specific initiative-based. So we're running the Next Step Shelter in the Alexandria area, and we've got a team right there in the Route 1 corridor, right near the South County Government Center, that's running that 53-bed family shelter. We run 4 different community centers in low-income housing developments, and those are in each of the developments, as you said, as far out as Centerville.
So that's interesting. I did not realize that you ran community centers.
Yeah, they're important, I think.
Yeah, I do too. That's where people go.
That's where people go, and these are after-school programs right in the subsidized housing neighborhood. So we have kids who come in every day for mentoring, for homework help, And then we run other components, self-esteem classes, computer classes, and we use those centers as a way to engage the parents and the whole family as well. So we'll have English as a second language classes in those centers, and we'll bring other groups in to teach other classes in those centers and really work on building the community in that community.
Well, so people who watch the show know that I'm all about community schools in Virginia, which we really haven't gotten to yet, except that a lot of schools have partnerships with nonprofits. It's just not all necessarily consolidated under an infrastructure, that, to your point about standardization and consistency, when you have a community schools, there's 6 pillars, they do restorative justice, they have wraparound social services. But we have school partnerships all across Fairfax County. And they're providing some of the things that a community school model would provide. And one of those really is, what do you do with kids after school? Where do they go to? How do they get homework help? Well, many of their parents are working 3 jobs. They don't have adult supervision in their lives. So your after school programs, and they've been around for a long time.
Long time, yeah. I'm not sure the exact start date, but it was definitely back in Linda's time.
I think so too.
I think Robinson might be the oldest one that we've run. It's right near George Mason University. Yeah. And so, so going forward, these, you've got like 5, 6 core programs, and it's a matter of like both building on that because the demand has increased. But what about collaborations? You mentioned that Bright Paths were doing a financial literacy class. At the Next Step Center.
So what are some of the other organizations that you're collaborating with? So
I also mentioned I just came from the South County Leadership Council, I mean, we work very closely with a number of the nonprofits in the area. Sometimes it's lessons learned from each other. Cornerstone's operating in the Reston area, Northern Virginia Family Services throughout the organization, the region. UCM, United Community Ministries in the.
I know all of these people. I've had so many of them on the show. But I do think
and I think all of us have the attitude that we each don't have to do everything. The question is, what is the thing we best do, and how can we best collaborate to get the best result?
No, I agree. And I think working together across nonprofits benefits everybody, because we're all working with limited resources, and we don't want to be redundant or wasteful. So when we come back from this break, we are going to be talking with Joe Fay, who's the Executive Director of FACETS, based here in Fairfax County. So please join us.
There. Can I tell you a cat joke? Just kidding. Why did the girl ask the mushroom to dance? Because he was a fun guy. What do you call a pig that knows karate? Pork chop. Why was the basketball court all wet? Why? Because the players kept dribbling all over it. Can I tell you another one? So how does a tissue dance? Put a little boogie on it. What's Beethoven's favorite fruit? Banana. What is a boxer's favorite drink? Fruit punch.
This is the moment I knew. His future had no boundaries.
There are some moments only the forest can inspire. Find yours at discovertheforest.org.
Welcome back to Your Need to Know. I'm your host, Catherine Reed, and today we're talking with Joe Fay. He's the Executive Director of FACETS, based here in Fairfax County. Thank you so much for being here, Joe.
Thank you, Catherine.
So we were talking about your amazing volunteers and how you are able to deliver these services through so many volunteers. So how do you find your volunteers? What's the process if somebody watching this show says, well, I would like to deliver hot meals, or I'd like to work with an after-school program?
Sure. So we actually have a volunteer orientation and schedule several nights a month to just come in and learn about opportunities to volunteer, as well as, we do pretty thorough background checks and everything, to become a volunteer. So there's a real process to signing up, and certainly we always welcome new volunteers. We talked about the Hot Meals program, big volunteer component of that. Almost the whole program is run by volunteers. Hypothermia volunteering comes through the community that's hosting, but many of them are older and older congregations and communities that love to have outside volunteers as well.
You bring up a good point, because in my old neighborhood, Christ Lutheran Church was a stone's throw from my house. It's also one of the polling places for Fairfax City. And that's one of the places where, with a hypothermia shelter, people in Fairchester Woods could easily volunteer, whether they're a member of that church
absolutely
or not. We all know the church because we go there to vote all the time. So you bring up a good point that even though you may not be a member of a faith-based community, you can go and say, I'd like to volunteer.
And hosting a week, I've talked to some of the coordinators at the congregations, and they use 150 to 200 volunteers for that week, because they're staffing from 5 in the evening to 7 in the morning, and serving 2 meals, and you want people around for activities and everything. So it's quite a commitment and a great place to do kind of a project-based volunteering, right? A limited time, come in for that.
And I think that's why a lot of people, unless you get a lot of people who are retired who can make a long-term commitment. There's a lot of people who are still working full-time and have families and other commitments who can say, I can give 1 day a week, 1 week a year to being a hypothermia shelter volunteer.
And it honestly, it opens your eyes to sit down and have dinner with folks who are in the hypothermia center, who are otherwise living in the street. You get a glimpse into other people's lives, and you appreciate. I think it helps us each appreciate how lucky we are.
I think so. I had Stacy Picard on here of the Urban Stories Project, and she was saying that that's what made her start this project to tell people stories, is she says, nobody, when they're 6 years old, thinks that they're going to grow up to be homeless. And she goes, it's not until you sit down and hear people's stories that you understand the trajectory of anyone's human life. And we don't necessarily sit down with people who are in a very different place from us. And she said it really was an aha moment to understand how people ended up where they have.
I agree. Yeah.
So volunteering.
And so we talked. Some things are project-based, limited scope. We also have volunteers who come in, as you said. There are people who volunteer at our office. There's at the front desk, or helping us moving clients, into a new housing situation. When we find, one of the things we do with hypothermia, of course, is we're trying to engage individuals at hypothermia, get them services, and find long-term housing for them. So this year so far, I think we've housed 25 of the folks who have come in for hypothermia.
That's amazing.
So that's a permanent roof over their head.
Absolutely.
And connection back to society. And we talk about housing first. Once you have a home and a roof, you can start building your life again.
Well, I'll tell you, your predecessor, Amanda Andere, that is the thing. If you talk to her for 5 minutes, she will tell you it's got to be about housing first. And not everybody approaches homelessness that way. But it does have to be. The stabilizing factor is you have to have a safe place, a roof over your head, and get back on your feet, get your health back, get education, get a job, figure out transportation, but it has to be housing first. So I'd say that's a core value.
That is a core value. And any of those things, in the Next Step shelter, we also deal with a lot of prevention. Probably
keeping people in their home. We do that with Bright Paths too. We have emergency assistance, because if you can keep people where they are, that's much better than trying to find an alternative.
And you talked about the different, the job, the medical emergency, the transportation challenge. Any one thing with a person or a family that's living paycheck to paycheck can put you in danger of losing your home.
Exactly.
So that component is just critical, I think.
And affordable housing is an issue in this county. It just is.
Right.
And you know, a lot of nonprofits, including Bright Paths, do what we can to advocate for more affordable housing, or set-asides, or working with developers, or working with local governments to figure out how we can create a larger variety of housing for people.
Yeah, it's certainly a challenge here. We all live here, know how expensive it is to live here, and frankly, watching my kids graduate from college and look at rents in the area in apartments, and then having them go to shared apartments because it's just unaffordable on a college graduate's salary.
Starting salary, I know. We've had wage stagnation since the 1970s. People really don't talk about it, and there's a lot of things that are not solving that problem of wage stagnation. But yes, I have 3 kids, and they are all in shared housing situations. And my daughter is in Richmond because it's just way less expensive.
Exactly.
Right.
And then if you think about the folks, many of the folks that are in our programs, they're at closer to a lower wage scale, right? 6% of the people I think in the county live below the poverty level, which is less than $30,000 for a family of 4.
It creates such a problem, especially when you talk about the kids in your after-school program. So many kids who are struggling in our public school systems is because their parents work all the time. Like a lot of them don't have adequate adult supervision. Never mind help with homework or school projects or some of the things other kids have.
And that's one of the great things about those after-school programs. And by the way, another place to potentially volunteer, right? To come in once a week and either mentor a particular child, student, or to run a program. Some groups run a reading program on a given day a week. So it's that adult modeling, adult presence that I think is really important.
I do too, and people should be creative, I would say. I work with a program called Grand Involve, and we have retired seniors in the classrooms of Title I schools in Fairfax County. But one of those volunteers started a knitting club after school at Crestwood. She says there are 50 kids in that club, and they do it on a semester basis.
See, who would have thought kids would knit,
50.
right?
And
Put the phone down and knit.
Boys and girls from 3rd to 6th grade. Knitting, and it's one of the most popular things. So when you think about an after-school program, it doesn't always have to be academic either. It's kind of like if you enjoy robotics, or if you enjoy doing maker. I've heard all about maker spaces and the things that young children are doing with paper towel rolls and cardboard and Scotch tape. There are things that you can bring to an after-school program besides just tutoring.
Absolutely.
So I'm kind of pumped up about this, but I think we need to address the fact that tax reform might have an unintended consequence for nonprofits. And this is something I don't think any of us understand what the ramifications are. But for people who end up using the standard deduction instead of itemizing their deductions, may start giving in a different way.
And I think the projections are fewer people will itemize now. Because the standard deduction is higher and there's caps on other deductions, which might lead people to say, okay, if I'm using the standard deduction, I don't get anything more for my charitable donation. We honestly don't know, right? This passed at the end of last year, but it's a concern. It's a concern among a lot of the nonprofits, especially small nonprofits, right? That are community-based and count on a lot of small donations from people right here in our area.
Absolutely. And so let's talk a little bit about your 30th anniversary breakfast, which is coming up on April 19th, Thursday.
April 19th at the Fairview Marriott Hotel.
And anybody can come, right? But the model of this breakfast, and I've attended the breakfast before, I've also been a table captain for your breakfast. So the model is, as a table captain, you've got a table of 10. And you invite 9 of your friends to come and hear from people who've been through your programs and the people who've benefited from having gone through your programs and your services. But there's no cost for the breakfast itself. And so anybody can actually go to your website and register, or people can go to your website and be a table captain, which is really the better thing.
And it's just FACETScares.org, www.facetscares.org, and sign up there, and we'd love to have you at the breakfast. You can hear about FACETS from me, but at the breakfast we'll hear from several clients who will tell their stories, and they're just so moving to understand the journey that people have gone gone through, and with a little help where they've gotten to.
You know, we talk a lot about giving people a hand up and not a hand out.
Right.
And this is kind of where this comes into play. If you've never, for people who've never worked with a nonprofit,
right,
who are basically providing support services in a variety of ways, because
right,
self-sufficiency, getting people back on their feet,
right,
so that they have a house, so that they have a job, so that they're a fully participating member of our society, is what we should all want. I mean, it's a win-win for the entire community.
It is a win for the entire community, and you know, it's helping people become their best selves.
Absolutely. And so the thing about the breakfast too, in addition to the fact that obviously it's your biggest fundraiser of the year,
it is,
but it's also an opportunity to learn about volunteer opportunities,
right?
Right? Like,
right,
there'll be a lot of people sitting in the room who in some way have supported your organization.
Right. Yeah, we'll have, I think we'll have over 300 people there. We'll have a coffee and a mixing from 7 to 8, and then served breakfast from 8 to 9 with speakers. Linda Wimpy is coming back because it's our 30th anniversary.
Yeah.
And she's going to talk. She'll receive a Citizen of the Year award. And then we'll have 3 of our clients, one who was in the original Robinson Square after-school program, who is now graduated from college, and she's going to tell us her story.
That's fantastic. And so the other thing we need to remind people of is that in Fairfax County we have budget hearings,
right,
where we all go cap in hand,
right,
and we sign up to speak about
right,
how important these programs are and the fact that they need to be funded.
Right. And this year, the new county executive has proposed a budget that has a 2.5-cent increase on property tax that will fund human services priorities, as well as a number of other priorities throughout the budget. But we certainly, and other organizations like us, really see that as important, that we stand behind that budget. It funds a lot of the human services needs that make our community the great place it is to live.
Right, and if it wasn't for nonprofits like FACETS, those services
right,
wouldn't be delivered by anybody else.
Right.
So people need to pay attention, you need to pay attention, and you need to show up for the budget hearings in Fairfax County to advocate for this 2.5-cent increase to fund the services that we've been talking about here today. Because for every 2 cents that's invested by the county, you can rest assured that people like Joe and Bright Paths and a lot of other nonprofits right, are out there trying to raise 5 times that amount of money to serve our community. And that is what you need to know.